up of a horizon of meaning and of a whole form of human life.
Where do we stand in the illusion it makes? What kind of space are we invited into?
The material relations between people become social relations between things. When we look at toasters, corn, and TVs, we don't see
still, to a large extent, live in the interregnum between worlds, if you will, or between paradigms. Not many people in the history of the world have faced that.
Diet Soap is a Sublation Media podcast. Hello, Sublation Media viewers and readers, and all you crazy commies out there. It's I'm the host of the Diet Soap podcast. Have been since 2009. Also, the head honcho here at Sublation Media. I'm the author of books such as Last Week's Apocalypse, After the Saucers Landed, Bash Bash Revolution, Wave of Mutilation, and many others. But you might go looking for Noam Chomsky in the Time Box, if you can find that somewhere. I've been mentioning that as the short stories I've written. Okay, enough of my credits. With me today is Ethan Linehan. Say it. Linehan. Okay. And he is a writer himself. He writes for Sublation Magazine, or has in the past. Today we're going to look back on an article he wrote for Sublation way back in 2022. It's called Wrong Life and Abortion, and it was a response to Conrad Hamilton's essay for Sublation, Abortion, Capitalism, and Demographic Control. Ethan, welcome to the Diet Soap podcast. Do you want to fill in a little bit more on your bio? Anything else you want to add?
Oh, goodness, my bio, my political autobiography. Well, thanks for having me, Doug. I'm so happy to be here. I have been listening to your podcast since, at least 2014, 2015. So it's really nice to finally be on here. I think, what to say about my background? I think I probably have a background that's pretty typical of a millennial leftist. I mean, a lot of my formative memories were post 9/11, war on terror kind of memories, but also the Great Recession. But one thing maybe a little bit different about me is I'm a leftist that grew up in the rural South. I grew up in East Tennessee. I was actually born somewhere much closer to your heart. I was born in Colorado Springs, but I didn't live there very long. Yeah.
You know, I was born in Tennessee.
Really? Wow.
I was born in Memphis. So and then ended up in Colorado. So you did the reverse.
Yeah. Well, something that's true about East Tennessee is the New Deal still has a very long shadow that is cast over that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of family members that were affiliated with the TVA and the IBEW. And so I had a very sort of pro-labor family, if you will. But a lot of my family is also of Cuban descent. And so anything to do with socialism, communism, that was not cool in the house. So I didn't know what to make of the left growing up, honestly. I joke sometimes to friends of mine that my journey to Marxism started in 2012 when I campaigned for Ron Paul. And I think that I was some sort of libertarian, maybe, in a sort of recoil against my family. They were a lot of Clinton Democrats. I'm trying to think of like formative experiences that brought me to the left. I remember one time in high school, there was a book I was reading. Have you ever read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I have not read that book, but I have seen it on coffee tables. And
it's everywhere. You go to any bookstore, the purple stacks they're huge. The basic idea,
the poor dad, works for a living.
Yeah.
And the rich dad invests. That's what I remember about the book.
Exactly. You don't want to be a poor dad. You don't want to work for someone else. You want to be a rich dad. You want to have many more assets than liabilities. You want to own some passive income in some form. And I remember reading this book.
Good advice. It's great advice. It reminds me of Steve Martin, an old Steve Martin joke. I do this all the time. Steve Martin said you get could give you advice on how to make $1 million. And the first step is to make $1 million. And the second step is when the tax man comes, just say to him, I forgot. So anyway, that's about the level, I think, of rich man, poor man there. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, there's an Adam Smith quote about how it's when you have a little bit of money, it's easy to make a lot, but the hard part is making that little bit of money.
Right.
So Rich Dad Poor Dad, I remember reading it in high school and thinking, okay, this is how to, succeed in the rat race, climb this ladder of self-ownership and working for yourself. But I remember thinking, like, why can't everybody do this? Why can't everybody become free in this way? And I guess one way of answering that is just some people are lazy. They're not going to bother to, put in the work to own these assets. And I guess I bought that for a while, but also I just started to think, like, maybe that's not the best we can do. And so I started to look up all sorts of alternative resources for thinking, like, what are the different possible ways of becoming free and arranging our economy in such a way that we don't have to all play this rat race. Mm-hmm. There's I can't remember what year, maybe like 1980, 1981, but Donald Trump gave this interview where he's talking about, like, we all want to play this game. We're all playing this game, but everybody can't win it, because if everybody won it, he said, we'd have a very strange situation. And I remember thinking, like, years later when I saw this interview, well, that's what I wanted. I wanted that strange situation where we're all winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, I started getting into all these sort of like libertarian-esque documentaries. Do you know the filmmaker Peter Joseph?
I think I have heard of Peter Joseph, but I may be confusing him with another Joseph. There's one guy who has the last name Joseph that works with Alex Jones. I think that's who I'm thinking of, and that's not who you're talking about, probably. But anyway.
I don't know, to be honest. But Peter Joseph was pretty famous in the late 2000s for this series of films called the Zeitgeist trilogy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they were kind of conspiratorial.
I remember Zeitgeist very well. I just didn't remember his name. And that's why I associated it with Alex Jones, even though it was because they were both, out early on the 9/11 was an inside job train.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That was a big part of the first documentary, I remember. Mm-hmm. And then there were other conspiracies about Christianity. The one that stood out to me as a Ron Paul guy at the time was like the Audit the Fed part of the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
But in those documentaries, he also brings up this sort of techno-utopia project called the Venus Project.
Mm-hmm.
There's this guy, I guess he's probably deceased now, but Jacques Fresco. He was big into this post-scarcity world. And they talked at great length in these documentaries about how possible that would be, how easy it should be to move to this post-scarcity world. And I was in these online forums at the time arguing with these right-wing people, like, oh, actually, what if capitalism, is destructive and unlimited growth is unsustainable? Like, what would we do as, libertarians if that turned out to be true, that capitalism it needs to turn into something else to keep on going. And so a lot of that, I didn't really have anywhere to go with that line of thinking. I didn't know that the left was even really a thing at the time. It wasn't until, and this is way too much biography. Your listeners will be bored soon.
No. This is great.
There was another incident, and so I grew up Catholic, and I had a lot of flirtations with the kind of new atheism, the four horsemen of, Dawkins and Dennett and Sam Harris, but I was always more drawn to Christopher Hitchens I couldn't even tell you why at the time. And so I kind of didn't really have a left politics at all, but I was sort of breaking away from my Catholic faith at the time. And I remember we all had to go on this Catholic retreat, and one of our gym teachers, former Marine, like hardcore dude, he took us all aside and he was saying, like, to be a good Christian, you need to take care of the people in need. And that might require taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. And it was this kind of Christian socialism that he was offering us. Some buddies and were laughing at it. We thought this is ridiculous. One of my buddies, he wanted to be a stand-up comedian one day, and so we went to a bookstore, and he said, "You remember how funny our gym teacher's speech was? You know, you should go pick a book off the shelf and see if you can mine it for a material that we can make jokes about." I ended up picking up the Communist Manifesto. And I'm like, if my gym teacher's speech was this funny, you know, maybe this book is full of stuff I can make fun of. I did not end up laughing at it. I ended up finding it a lot more compelling than I expected, taking it much more seriously than I ever intended to. And that by the time I read that, it was like 2015 or so, and I was still trying to wrap my head around, you know, the left, around socialism, around communism. Bernie's campaign was starting up at the time, and I posted some silly thing on Facebook like, this silly socialist needs to find out that money doesn't grow on trees. And a buddy of mine said, well, maybe socialism doesn't mean what you think it means. And so it sent me down this rabbit hole of looking up all kinds of stuff on the left. Not too much longer after that, I ended up meeting the Platypus Affiliated Society and ended up getting a really, really high quality education from them. And I guess that it took me many years to try to figure out all these concerns I had about freedom and post-scarcity societies and all that stuff ended up a very mediated way pointing me down to Marxism and the left.
Not to be narcissistic, but you mentioned at the start that you've been listening to the Diet Soap podcast since 2014. So how does the podcast, my old podcast, or this podcast fit into your political education?
I couldn't tell you what year it was, but I remember listening to some stuff you'd done with the anti-aging stuff, like Aubrey de Grey. I don't remember when that was, but I remember those are some episodes I watched early on. Gosh, it's been a while. I wish I could, talk up the Diet Soap more than.
But did you know that it was that it was supposedly a Marxist podcast when you listened?
No, it was too strange for me to make sense of at the time. I couldn't have given it a label.
Right. Yeah, and it was called Diet Soap, so how would you know, right? I mean, but I remember Aubrey de Grey. That would have been around 2014, I think, maybe, okay. And or 15 possibly. And I felt that I was being my usual contrarian self by embracing Aubrey de Grey because he was, associated with tech bros and billionaires and this sort of techno-utopian vision that people like at the Chapo Trap House would rail against. And I was like, no. We should, as socialists, embrace the most advanced technologies that are being developed by capitalism. And wouldn't it be interesting to live in a world where we didn't know what our expiration date was? Not that we wouldn't have one, but there wouldn't be one that's set in place by biology. And so, and I still, now as I've gotten even older, you want more years later, I'm like, come on, Aubrey, let me look. What are you doing today? But it doesn't look great. It looks like he's been saying we're 15 to 20 years away for the last 15 years. So we'll see what happens. All right, so let's talk about your piece. I mean, look, we kind of already are because you were describing how you got to the left, and it was sort of it was so far away, I think, from how people in the 19th and early 20th century would have come to the left, right? It was this sort of heavily mediated kind of a history lesson in memes or something. It was, it sounds very online. Am I wrong about that? I mean,
my own experience,
extremely online. So it's a matter of attaching yourself to fashionable ideologies and trends within capitalism, and all of them trying to address a basic dissatisfaction or disaffection from the world as it is, but in the terms that can be imagined and expressed immediately. But it's also interesting to know that it did lead you. I mean, if we're going to claim that Marxism is different, I'll do that. Then it did lead you to embracing a deeper theoretical understanding of society and to Marxism eventually. And I think in the English-speaking world anyway, to the most interesting little Marxist sectarian group there is, which is the Platypus Affiliated Society. So but when you wrote Wrong Life at the beginning of your article on abortion, what were you thinking of as what does Adorno mean by a wrong life?
Yeah, I mean, well, so there's this article, and we can talk at great length about this article. I think that's probably what we should focus on. Subsequent to this article, just a couple years ago or last year, I guess, I published a academic article because on the side that's my job. I'm a practicing philosopher and I teach it, and so I published this other article about abortion, and I find it funny that I've now been published twice on abortion. I teach about it all the time. I teach about it in biomedical ethics, but it's a sensitive subject as a straight white man to talk about sometimes.
I guess fine.
Well, I mean, I'm in my union on campus, and there was somebody in the union that found out that I've been published on abortion, and questions came up like, oh, maybe we should suspend like blind peer review so men can't get to publish on this kind of thing. Like only women should get to publish on this. So it can still be very taboo to talk about these things.
I know, but I mean, just right there, isn't that the most backwards thing that you can imagine? I mean, anyone who has a thought should be able to write it down and publish on it. And it obviously, the idea that only X type can write about it. First of all, if you limited it to women, okay, or even to, let's say in America, the most oppressed group of Black women or Black lesbian women, even, although maybe that wouldn't be as diverse as I'm about to claim, but you would get a diversity of opinions, and you would find the same fault lines within women who are writing on the subject as you find them in men. It's not, there are pro-life people and pro-choice people in both sexes, and it's no guarantee that you're going to have meet the person with the right opinions just because of their sex or their race or their sexuality. So anyway, I just want to say that very obvious thing, but okay. But Wrong Life, the question was, what is the wrong life in your piece, Wrong Life and Abortion?
Yeah, I guess if there's a kind of socialist or Marxist critique of abortion, it's abortion under capitalism, right? And under capitalism, it's wrong to treat getting an abortion as some exercise of autonomy, pure and simple. It could also be a phenomenon among many of a lack of autonomy, right? So you can think of abortion as a symptom of our unfreedom, of our alienation from our reproduction. Any kind of choices about how life is produced and reproduced, that's constrained by capitalism and by its imperatives. And that comes out in even the most intimate decisions, even the most personal decisions, like what to do with a pregnancy, that reflects capital's domination of our lives. Now, the wrong life, part of what it means when I raise something like Adorno's wrong life cannot be lived rightly in this essay, every attempt to live rightly, to do the right thing, he would have said it takes place in an objectively wrong context. The morality, this question of choosing to do the right thing, well, that's taking place when capitalism is only offering wrong things to do. It's only offering bad choices. And you get it even coming out in the language of abortion, like a woman's right to choose. Well, to choose what? Like choose among really shitty options sometimes. At least, as from a socialist perspective, I think we could say something like that. Maybe the last thing on this is we've at least seen lots of people talking about abortion as austerity. You get a lot of support from maybe capitalist businesses for abortions because abortions can be cheaper than parental leave. And that aspect of, wanting to be pregnant, maybe struggling to financially keep that pregnancy going, that the child is an unaffordable luxury. Living standards have been hollowed out, wages have dropped. And so that is really what I mean when I say wrong life and abortion. It's taking place in this totality of decreasing living standards, not fully autonomous decision making. And abortion may be an illustrative example of that. It's not the only example we could turn to, for sure.
Well, you were responding to Conrad Hamilton's Abortion, Capitalism, and Demographic Control.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me, if I'm remembering correctly, that at least part of what you just said wouldn't be something that Conrad Hamilton would disagree with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that for instance, that the idea that you should mistrust big businesses' support for abortion rights because it's driven by ulterior motives around profitability. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think most people on the left would disagree with that. What I would just add is, that the pro-natalist, pro-life position also can meet the capitalist meet their needs where they're at, because, there are also moments when there's a need or projected need for more workers. So you actually want to swallow the costs of childcare or increase wages, or probably a combination of increasing wages and decreasing both consumption and prices, so that you can generate another round of workers and more of them than you had before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all of this is mediated through capital accumulation, and the ways in which capital accumulation is set in opposition to itself or in contradiction to itself. But what were you trying to correct in Conrad Hamilton's essay?
Well, so everything you just laid out about, like, how does abortion fit into capitalism and capitalism's imperatives, a lot of that does come up in Hamilton's article, for sure. I guess I was trying to emphasize a different dimension of the issue than just like what capitalism requires demographically. Maybe I should say, like, because it has been 4 years now, so maybe I should situate that a little bit. The piece was written in the summer right after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. And that was a big kind of political impasse between the capitalist parties, but also, the left, at least in America. Abortion was thrown back to the states, and that was being used as this kind of a good occasion for electoral blackmail, if you will. Right. So the Democrats wanted the left to take sides, and there was this kind of panic, like overturning Roe was going to be this disaster. One thing I wanted to point out with this article is the right that was being overturned. On paper, it was being overturned, but in practice, it had already been hollowed out for years, right? So the right to get an abortion can already be limited in so many ways. I mean, it can be costly. It can, there are long waiting periods, the geography, like how far away you are. Do you have doctors that approve of it? So in that respect, not as much changed on the ground as the left wanted to think about. It's hard to get an abortion no matter what the law says. And so that fact alone,
especially in the South, right?
In the South, for sure, especially in some of the states, below the Mason-Dixon line. And we started to see the laws change right after this. Something like that fact of abortion was already hard to get should prove the issue goes deeper than simply like a fixation on a law would indicate. And so that summer, when I was writing this article, I was kind of involved in this debate. Well, debate in a loose sense. I mean, some of us were responding to each other, but some of us were not. It wasn't just Conrad and me. There was also Freddie DeBoer had written an article about this. Jean Bajelon,
Mm-hmm.
Dorna Darabi. Like there were a lot of articles in Sublation that summer about abortion and what it meant for the left, like as a political issue. Now Hamilton's article, it does talk a lot about how abortion is shaped by capitalist interests. It's a kind of he talks about like economic factors and demographic control. But to me, it seemed like a very simple if P then Q kind of logic about how the lack of abortion rights just serves capital, like straightforwardly. And in fact, at one point by capital, he seems to just mean Republicans. And so abortion, but also immigration come up in his article about like there are these control valves, like you increase or decrease the total population using abortion and immigration. And I guess in a kind of vulgar Marxism, you might explain everything by finding some quote about the reserve army of labor or something. You just slot in your concern there. Now, I would say, sure, in the final analysis, yes, the needs of capital, they need to create surplus value, and that's going to influence population numbers. But I don't think it came up in Hamilton's article that is an extremely mediated process.
Right.
And I don't think Marx ever intended the kind of reserve army idea to serve as this all-purpose explanation for demographic phenomena. Like first of all, the reserve army, right? The dynamics that form that fluctuates quite rapidly, but the age it takes to get to working age, like 16.
Oh, I know. Years. Yeah, yeah. Like it's not like J.D. Vance today can just snap a reserve army into existence by being pro-natalist, right?
Those rhythms just don't line up like that.
And the other thing is it's always speculative because you have this political project now based on the needs of today or what you assume them to be, and things can change overnight actually in terms of what the needs might be. So
immigration might be easier to explain that way, but abortion, it just seems like it's the timelines are too different to me to say it's that simple. Now I did think that there was a rational kernel to thinking in that way. So like the idea that there are these decisions that are made by individuals and that influences these things. That's true, but in a lot of ways, that's a more political question. And so that's what my article was trying to bring up. I wanted to tackle the political character of it. And abortion, like so much else, is handled through politics. And
now let's pause here because I want you to tell me what you mean by the political character of abortion, because, of course, Conrad would say he was addressing the politics of abortion by pointing out that the Republicans benefit as representatives of capital by anti-abortion legislation or the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And that's a political analysis, or that's a political point. And when you say you're talking about politics a little differently. What are you assuming it takes for something to be, from your point of view, political?
Well, there's a lot I can say, just generally speaking, about like politics versus policy. Like, but before we go down that path, politically speaking, it wasn't just simply like the Republicans are going to benefit from the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Both of the capitalist parties, they have their programs for managing this dysfunctional social reality, and they need electoral constituencies to support whatever their programs are. And I don't think you get very far in understanding abortion unless you look at more than just these economic pressures that are supposedly put on by capitalist parties. You have to look at how these capitalist parties are manipulating the issue for their political gain. And of course, ignoring the underlying, economic realities. For example, like the overturning of Roe versus Wade, that took place right before the midterms. And the midterms were an occasion, not just for the Republicans to benefit, but that was a time when the left could be blackmailed to uncritically support the Democrats. I mean, they were hoping for a blue wave, if you remember. It didn't quite pan out that way. The seats that they picked up were not as many as they hoped, and they lost some. So that kind of situates it politically at the time. I think that my article, it doesn't share Hamilton's understanding of what's necessary politically. So a big part of the kind of default orientation of the left is their alignment with the Democrats as this lesser evil. And that the prescribed path for the left by Hamilton and in some of the others in that summer's conversation, they were hoping for this new Supreme Court ruling on abortion, or they were hoping for new laws to be passed by the Democrats. And all I had to do was suggest, hey, those new laws, that's not going to be the self-activity of the working class. And I think that earned me some enemies that summer. I don't think Hamilton liked that. I know Darabi didn't like that. So that's part of what I mean by politics, is not just what's being done, but who's doing it, right? Is it the working class that is responsible for whatever we're demanding, or is it just the capitalist parties that we're asking for handouts? You want to? I don't know if you want to respond to any of that.
No, I know. I totally understand what you're saying, and I've said similar things in the past. But what I would note is that it was fairly clear at that time, and it became more clear over the years, that there would not be any attempt to pass a federal law or institute any kind of federal fix for the abortion question. The Democrats took the stance that the Republicans would pass some sort of federal abortion ban. That was what they ran on, and the Republicans kind of ran. At least Trump in 2024 ran on saying, "Listen, I got what you wanted. It's fixed now." And I went to the Republican convention in this movie that's just about to come out. We're putting the credits together now.
I've been eagerly waiting for this.
Yeah. So we're in final stages. Final stages. I've been saying that for a while. Like pieces around the corner, but no, the movie's about to come out. But I went to the Republican convention, and there were protesters, pro-life protesters at the Republican convention, upset that there was no plank in the platform for a federal abortion ban, and that they were going to leave it to the states. What you can learn from that is that often addressing a problem directly is less political or less advantageous for those who do politics for capital than just leaving the problem in place and failing to address it. Really.
Maybe let's think about that word failure, because that was something else I was trying to suggest in my article. Is it a failure that really nothing changed for 50 years? Roe v. Wade was the template that we went with, and nothing was ever codified into law more than that. In fact, parts of it were stripped away over the years. Is that a failure, or is it a success? Because I think one of my hopes in this article was to just say, look, the dominant framing of the abortion issue, kind of pro-choice, pro-life, that binary, that has kept things suspended that way for so long. That's just been the status quo. And both of the Democrats and Republicans seemed to benefit from it being suspended that way. It was when Trump came along and neutralized it as an issue that really upset people. They could no longer kind of mobilize the fear of each side to maintain, party loyalty. The Democrats were used to campaigning on threats to Roe v. Wade, even though they were never going to codify anything. And the Republicans could campaign on the defense of life. They were never really going to materially support it. And so this endlessly reproducing spectacle. Kayfabe, it's pro wrestling.
Yeah, and it became a kind of point of identity on both sides, to be anti-abortion or pro-choice, was told people what kind of person you were. I recall having a conversation with a woman who was pro-choice, and I asked, well, what if, imagine a world where, your right to an abortion was completely, enshrined into law, and you knew that was protected. And they said, well, my politics wouldn't change at all because of all these other things that women face in society, and that wouldn't be significant. So the abortion issue was just sort of a symbol that then could be used to stand in for a variety of other complaints around sexism in society. And I think a lot of what goes on is symbolic and is used simply to successfully garner support for continuation of the politics of the present, the politics that we know.
Now, I guess that couldn't go on forever, though, and that's another thing that I stressed that a little bit in the article for Sublation, but it comes out a little bit more in my academic article. Maybe we can put that on the video description.
Is it available online, that academic article?
It is, yeah. Oh gosh, what's the title of it? It's like towards pluralism and the politics of abortion or something. Moral pluralism. You have to come up with really general names for these academic journals. What I kind of stress more in that article is that the old tried and true symbolic cultural ways of understanding these things, those are really coming apart at the seams now. They're fracturing. The kind of the beginning of Roe versus Wade in the 70s and the end of it in 2022, those are convenient end caps for a whole era of neoliberalism. And as the shift out of neoliberalism is experienced politically, it's a crisis for those old ways of doing business. I know you've had people like Chris Cutrone on the podcast many times, and he'll constantly talk about a realignment taking place. Well, one of the questions I'm hoping socialists ask is, can we take advantage of this realignment? Can we peel off anybody from these cultural signifiers and the typical pro-life, pro-choice, ways of brokering the constituencies? What if we could somehow disrupt that, or if it's already being disrupted, can we lean into that? I think we're seeing evidence that possibility, it is a possibility. So in the years since 2022, when the first article came out, the terrain has shifted a little bit. I mean, the kind of the issue being thrown back to the states, that opened up all kinds of questions, and surprising ways. I think the left typically is slow to recognize change, right? And the left doesn't always acknowledge certain changes as opportunities. Do you think the right is faster to recognize change? Well, it could be they're faster to recognize it. Maybe they're more made uncomfortable by it. I think maybe the left, and this is sort of a self-criticism of the left, but the left is just not in a position to make good on these opportunities and take advantage of them in a way that maybe the right is. Like that's where change comes from nowadays all too often. They're just in a better position to do stuff about it. They're in the driver's seat. But what I didn't want to happen is for the left to see all these like new issues for abortion, politics, and organizing, and just let that all pass by, or worse, sort of defend the old way of doing things, the old regime, right? So don't spend all of our energies mourning what has passed. Don't become the guardian of what's being undone. We need to be ahead of the curve rather than reactive. And that's something that I was hoping to stress with my article is neoliberalism and its way of handling abortion is over and done. And we need to not fight to preserve the old symbols and the old slogans. That world's gone, and we need to figure out what are the new challenges for the left. I don't know that the left has been very good at that lately, and so that's part of what I was hoping to interrupt by engaging in that debate that summer.
Right. Let's take a look at one of the things that you point out that I think is most interesting, and also from my point of view, both the most threatening to me and also utopian at the same time, is the idea that socialists should take up, rather than trying to sway the state to either provide abortion rights or to stop abortions, rather socialists should stand with abortion rights, should stand with those who would like to have access to abortion, and help to provide them, even when they are made illegal. That creating alternative institutions within civil society to meet the needs of working class people through socialist organizations rather than through administrated society was what you recommended. And I, on the one hand, understand that in theory. On the other hand, I just all these visions of like coat hangers and premature deaths and just all sorts of risks emerge. And also, I guess I feel as though there's an acceptance of being underground, which maybe is not to be fully embraced. But the other thing that happens when I think about what you're suggesting is I also think about the way in which socialists might form militias as an alternative to policing. And that really makes me feel nervous, because I just know that for the most part, if you get people together to enforce law without any structure, it's just going to be like lynch mobs and barbarism. That's how I think of it. And I think of it that way because I've seen left organizations self-police, and it's been all usually horrible, with no standards of evidence, just pure power politics and rhetoric to bring down people and so forth. So anyway, so those are my objections. I want to embrace what you're saying. So what do you make of that?
Well, so a couple issues. I want to talk about what motivates this whole civil society stuff, but of course the issue of how realistic is it? Is this actually doable? Should we be scared off by it? Actually, let me get to that in a moment. What's motivating it? Why I felt compelled to respond to somebody like Hamilton is I felt like there needed to be some kind of historical recovery of what classical Marxism or how even not just Marxists but socialists of many stripes, how they used to tackle reproductive politics. There might be some lessons there, maybe negative lessons. What's missing today, and first and foremost, as I understand Marxism, its ethos is anti-state. Marx and Engels, they're going to oppose any measure that strengthens the state's power over society. And so you're right. In the article, I do gesture towards older examples of this kind of independent organizing of society done to build up the working class and make them self-sufficient, make them conscious of what they're. That was the bread and butter of socialist parties for the late 19th and early 20th centuries. If your readers and listeners, if you're interested in this, somebody to look up is Antoinette Konnikov. She was a doctor and she wrote a very early birth control guide. But she was also a founding member of like so many different left organizations. She was involved in the Socialist Party of America, Communist Party of America, Communist League of America. So she's a kind of example one might turn to. But you don't have to just think Marxists. I mean, there were liberal activists like, Margaret Sanger, all kinds of organizing she did in defiance of the Comstock Act and other prohibitive laws. So there's a history there. And I felt like Hamilton was unfamiliar with that history. It became evident in my exchange with him that he didn't see that kind of grassroots stuff, or if he did, he kind of conflated it with just grassroots organizations making demands on the state. And that imperative of socialists of yesteryear to organize independently of the state, that didn't show up in the conversation to that point. And I felt like I needed to throw it in there as here's another road that people used to travel down, especially today when that's absent and there is no civil society really to speak of, and the state increasingly appears as the only thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what was in the background of my fears, is that when I think about civil society organizations, I don't think of them as having deep roots or solid structures, but being run kind of as, I don't know, some little cults of personality when they're on the left, or maybe clubs or in groups, that kind of thing. They're not really institutionalized in civil society. They're not disciplined at all. They don't have principles that they stick by very well. It just seems a very dysfunctional terrain to me. And that's why, I kind of gravitate towards, not in theory, but in practice, towards state solutions, because, when you're facing the state, they're bogged down by all sorts of rules. And if you think of yourself as clever, you might be able to get by based on that basis, even when you're up against it. You have the right to remain silent and that kind of thing. When you're facing an angry mob that wants to cancel you, or then your rights go out the window. You don't have the cleverness, doesn't help you, that kind of thing. So,
I guess I'm thinking back to my libertarian days. They would make a big fuss about wanting to be anti-state. No laws against like owning a nuclear bomb, or no cops out on the street. But in a world where there's lots of there's war and there's violence and there's crackheads out on the street, maybe that is ridiculous to call for a kind of anti-statist ethos. I'm not saying we're ready for that. I'm not saying that I can just go point the left towards currently existing civil social organizing and be like, get on board with that. I do think it would have to be built up. It would have to be started from scratch. I mean, maybe some of your listeners would point me in a direction.
The campaign for a socialist party, Ethan. The campaign for a socialist party.
Gosh, I wish I had the time for it. It's been years. I feel like at one point I had the skill set. I would be doing community gardens and all sorts of drives I used to install fire alarms in old people's homes. So I used to have that side of me, but gosh, it's been years. I need to get back into it. So yeah, maybe there are, people making efforts in that direction, but I can't just put my stamp of approval on any currently existing form of that. But what I would just say is there have been historical precedents for it, and they didn't necessarily devolve into the kind of cults of personality or you raise like the coat hanger, back alley, unsafe alternatives. There have been all kinds of examples that one can draw from. There's a way in which this sounds kind of anarchisty, but you don't have to look just towards anarchists. I do think that socialists There's a rich history there, but you also don't even need the left so much. Like if you're trying to answer the question, how realistic is this sort of proposal to be, organizing civil society? Ask the church, ask the mafia. Like I know when Chris Coutron's been on your show, he's drawn comparisons. Like if we're trying to build a social constituency for the socialism, he's compared it to, growing a racket or growing a religious army for God. If you watch any mob drama, like right now, I'm a big fan of Tulsa King. Do you watch Tulsa King at all?
No, I haven't seen that. No.
Oh, I love it. Sylvester Stallone is getting pretty old, but he's great. Listeners, throw in the chat what your favorite mob drama is. But I think in any of these mob dramas, it's inevitable that some character is going to have a problem, and a mob member will say, "Hey, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I know a guy." And they've got this Rolodex of doctors and mechanics and lawyers and teachers and other professionals. They've got them on speed dial for when a need in the family comes up. So you can imagine a mob boss has a daughter, probably Catholic. She needs an abortion. They're gonna call a doctor, and discreetly they're gonna perform one, and she's gonna go to confession in her local parish or whatever. Okay, that could be one way of imagining this future. And if that's the future, I don't necessarily want to sign up for it, because of course the mafia, they're built on violence and crime, and they're not premised on the right kind of historical consciousness, whatever. But that is at least one example of how this.
But that's a practice that maybe we'd want to pick up from the mob. Have connections to socialist doctors, socialist lawyers, socialists who would do things for the party.
Well, and unfortunately, any socialists that I know that have tried this, like in tenant organizing, for example, not even reproductive stuff, but in tenant organizing, you go out to organize tenants and you find out, oh shit, this is the mafia's turf already. Like they've staked out a claim here. And so sometimes. Oh,
really? How does that go down? How do you discover that? Like, give me an example.
I don't want to go into too many details, but I've got friends in Chicago and in New York.
I don't want to get you killed. I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, I take that back.
Yeah, I've got friends in Chicago and New York, and they'll go to talk to some tenants, and they're like, "Hey, you need to leave. Like, we're already accounted for," and they don't want to say much more than that. But those connections between the mob to organize people, like that's why we have this term organized crime, right? They are very organized, and there could be a socialist analog to that, right? Another model that really takes that up in real life, and people, I recommend this HBO documentary about the Janes, not Jane like the religion, like Jane like the name, Jane. There was this thing in Chicago in the late 60s, early 70s called the Jane Collective. And at the time, they were sort of socialist-minded, left-leaning, mostly women that did this. This documentary goes into detail about how they outcompeted the mob to have these networks of sorry, my cat is meowing. They had these networks of offering care. They would have doctors that would come train them to do the procedures, and then they would very quickly pick up the medical expertise to do it themselves. They had all kinds of crowd-funded and self-provided legal defenses in case anybody got in trouble. Any kind of socialist politics of reproduction could take that up as a model. Well, I'll leave it there, but maybe one of the more controversial things we could talk about is who would they be working with, right? Like, are you going to get pro-life and pro-choice people on the same page for any of this? But that could be a separate issue.
Well, yeah, so those were your kind of responses to Conrad Hamilton and that's sort of a full description, I think, of your intervention there back in 2022. How do you think you were received? I mean, you sort of talked about it already, but how did that get picked up when you pointed these things out?
Well, I do think I said my piece. I really did think of sublation as this kind of indispensable clearinghouse for ideas. But I didn't know that I had any more ideas to share at the time, or I didn't know that I would get through to Hamilton or Darabi or any of the others. So I was content to let sleeping dogs lie and to not say anything more. It's only been because of the changes since then that I've decided to start thinking about all this again. At the time, I remember I was accused of just inverting my own logic. Like, I'm saying the left too often sides with Democrats on the abortion issue, and I just want them to flip that and side with the Republicans. Like, I remember that was a criticism.
I don't see how anyone could take that from your article, because you quite explicitly side with the pro-choice side of the debate, despite also pointing out that, true freedom would be the freedom to have a child or not. But yeah, I don't see that. That seems like a bad faith reading of your article to me.
Well, I think if I can, I'm trying to motivate my own criticisms here. Maybe part of what they had in mind is they felt I was just too optimistic about it being a issue of federalism now, that because it's thrown back to the states, I'm somehow embracing that as a good thing. It's what Trump and his appointed Supreme Court wanted, and I'm like championing that. I guess maybe that's what they saw.
I see. Yeah. But they championed that not because they wanted to see abortions banned. I mean, maybe sometimes they did, but more because it would serve their constituency and take it off of the list of tactics that the Democrats could use electorally.
Yeah.
It was not that they were so committed. I mean, Trump wasn't so committed to being pro-life, really.
Yeah.
So I think you can say there's an opportunity in it being thrown to the states without saying, oh, Trump's full agenda is to be lauded and supported, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't, obviously, as a person on the left, we're pretty marginal still. Sorry to burst people's bubble. We're pretty marginal. So I can't really do a damn thing about, keeping it at the federal level or keeping it at the national level or having it devolve to the states. All I can say is, hey, this is what reality has offered us. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to somehow put this into the service of socialism? How are we going to build up, the politics that take over society with this as our tools and material? And so all I was trying to point out is it does change the political calculus in a way now that it's at the state level, and if socialists are keeping a weather eye on the horizon, they can see some of these opportunities popping up and to intervene, whereas maybe some of these opportunities would have not showed up or been on the table in the old sort of neoliberal Roe versus Wade paradigm. I wasn't really taking a stance either way, saying it's better if it's enshrined by the Supreme Court or not. I was trying to point out, if it's enshrined by the Supreme Court, that's not the working class that did it. It goes back to the kind of policy debate. And even if it's not enshrined, we still have to be organizing for socialism somehow.
Right. I mean, just because it's going to be taken up on the state level, that doesn't mean that it will be really determined by everyday working people at that level, right? It will be determined by capitalist politics on the state level, which there might be a little weaker, might be easier to have some community organizing help shape it, but even those community organizations will be dictated to by one of the two parties, I would think. So, yeah, well, listen, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I want you to stick around. We can record a second half and you can listen to me grouse for a while about my, these days I've for a while there, I was sort of dormant on Twitter. I didn't do much on Twitter. And then now things will come up and I get the addiction to like spouting off on Twitter. So we can maybe talk about just the state of the left in general right now. And you can maybe rein me in, pull me back to reality. You seem like a very sensible man, Ethan. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, let's do our best.
Okay, and so I'm going to play the outro, the pitch to join Sublation on Patreon. And so you should all do that. And thank you very much. If you enjoyed this conversation, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons help to make sure that Sublation Media can continue to provide interviews, videos, books, and articles that are critical of the left from the left. If you are tired of remaining stuck within bourgeois ideologies and politics, help us sublate them both.